Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster. We're going to talk about the new Jacquemus show because it is a turning point in one of the most important French fashion houses currently working. Porte Jacquemus, the hunk, has gone from working at the Paris Comme des Garçons store to being one of the most influential forces in modern women's wear. And the show was wild. I was lucky enough to attend in my Jacquemus shirt, which inadvertently made it look like I was doing a Fabio cosplay. Very professional. The show took place in a rural area near Arles in the south of France, which tourists and Instagram users know as that place in France that has the pink lakes. By the way, there's like a bunch of photos online that turn the color saturation up so much that it kind of ruins the effect of this natural phenomenon. But I took a video. This is what these lakes actually look like.
Wow, that lake's really pink.
It's pretty crazy. And that lake is pink because of a combination of a certain kind of algae that's in the water and the enormous amount of salt in that area. And that second reason is why we are talking about this. So, the show took place in the French salt flats. Did you know that France had salt flats? I sure didn't. I knew they had a pink lake, but I did not know that directly adjacent to that lake is salt flats. Literally just pebbles of salt. When the show started, the models emerged from high atop a salt mountain, literally, and made their way down on a switchback path until they were close enough to the seated audience. And this is actually one of the biggest things that you can miss watching the video as opposed to being present for the runway show. Everybody always talks about like,
Oh, really? You can't experience it unless you're there.
but no one ever wants to actually tell you why that is. So in this case, it actually was very, very moving being present because of their use of distances. Runway shows don't really get to use distances very much because you need to be close enough to actually see the clothes. But in this show, they emerge literally like almost on like the horizon. It was up on top of this mountain and the models moved down the switchbacks and then eventually passed directly in front of everyone who was seated. And to see that full process, because they were, I'm not joking, they're so far away that I was like, oh, well, that's very pretty looking. There's no way they're gonna walk all the way over here. But they did. I did a little calculation using my height and steps and how far each step approximately is, and I determined that with the switchbacks and everything, the models walked a little under half a mile or 0.8 kilometers in order to do this runway show. And then after the show, one of the models told me that they had to do 3 dress rehearsals prior to the actual show itself. There was an enormous amount of walking in this show. I actually think that that's really cool because I take in a lot of runway shows and the vast majority of them are just like airtight, completely, micromanaged, completely controlled environments wherein there isn't a lot of unpredictability that can happen. But with this show, because there's just so much walking that's going on, it was very cool to watch a runway setup wherein the models are being physically challenged. It added a very human element to it. If you're new here, hello, my name is Bliss. I am a full-time professional fashion critic. I do deep dive analyses to uncover the nuances, references, and artfulness of designer clothes. If that's what you like,
You should subscribe.
I've done another video where I did a breakdown of every single Jacquemus show all in one video. I've done a deep dive into Dior Haute Couture. I have a bunch of videos of me running around during Paris Fashion Week covering all the different shows that I go to. It's a party here, it's really cool.
But here's the deal.
Being independent means that I have to depend on Patreon support, the support of my actual viewers, in order to continue doing this as my job. It's just a few bucks a month and will hopefully make it where I, a grown man, can hopefully someday move out of this, my parents' house. I love living here, but it might be time at some point for that to be over. So yeah, go sign up. Patreon.com/BlissFoster. You also get exclusive videos and you get to join the private Discord server, which if you don't know what that is, it's essentially a private group chat for a bunch of fashion friends. Join it up. Link is in the description. Jacquemus runway shows always stand out because they are always doing something just huge. And actually, here's a little Fashion Week factoid that I find to be super interesting. Shows like this cannot happen under normal fashion circumstances. When a brand shows during Fashion Week, there's a calendar of shows and the schedule is packed very, very tightly. So in order to participate in the Fashion Week calendar, you almost always have to show within the city of Paris. Because if you go too far out, then a bunch of people might say, ugh, I can't go all the way over there because I need to go to these other runway shows that are still inside the city like everyone else. Now, there is an infinite number of gorgeous buildings in Paris. It is not hard to find a good place for a runway show there, but if you want to show in, say, a lavender field or Hawaii or a field of wheat or on the French salt flats, that just isn't an option. Unless? Haha, just kidding. Unless? Well, no, JK. Unless you just go off the Fashion Week calendar. And when a brand shows off calendar, they can do shows anytime they like, anywhere they like. It's also a pretty big power move because brands can truly only go off calendar if they are powerful enough to draw the kind of media and celebrity attention to just come to their show whenever they schedule it. You can only do it if you are a major player in contemporary fashion. But there's actually another element of this as well. Jacquemus's shows are a reflection of them as clothing designers. I will explain with some questions. We'll ignore the clothes for just a moment and focus on the runway itself. What makes this runway video so unbelievably beautiful? What makes this runway so otherworldly? What makes this beautiful? It's just nature the way that it already is. All Jacquemus did was put a runway in the middle of it. Now we're gonna get into a little bit of nuance. You gotta really pay attention here. Hang with me, okay? The clothes are the same way. Jacquemus's clothes are some of the most defining works in women's wear right now because they do not distract at all from the beauty of the person wearing them. Are they distinctive? Absolutely. I could identify a Jacquemus piece without seeing the tags. So like a lot of other clothes, these clothes are flattering, they're innovative, but unlike many other fashion brands, they point the viewer towards the beauty of the person who is wearing it. A dress, an accessory, some heels, each of them pointing towards its wearer. And I think that's why the brand has seen so much success. Just like finding a beautiful location and laying a runway in the middle of it and saying, great, it's perfect the way it already is. These clothes do not try to distract or try to hold their own narrative over their wearer. They are simply pointing back towards the person wearing them. That is very hard to do, and I think that is why Jacquemus is redefining luxury for a new generation of women. And that whole, okay, kind of shifting gears here, that whole deal with the location points us towards one of the main inspirations for this show. And that is the 1972 French film titled The Inner Scar. That incredible tip, by the way, is from the god Loic Prigent, casually posting gold nuggets of information in his Instagram stories. There's not really any inspiration taken from the actual clothing in this movie because literally the entire wardrobe is just this outfit, this kid's outfit, and a lot of nudity. Like 60% of this movie might be nudity. But the primary inspiration from this movie comes from the intense brutal landscapes. And there actually have been some film critics that have said that the primary character of this film is the landscape in which it's filmed. But this is where this gets really interesting. You have only cleared the tutorial, my friends. We're gonna get into the really juicy stuff here. My brother is running around the house right now preparing for a date, so we're gonna pause for a second. But okay, this is where things get really, really interesting because Simone Porte Jacquemus is bringing us into a new era of his design with this collection. The show is titled Le Papier, or The Paper. I know, I speak a little French. Thank you. Okay, thank you. It's not a big deal, it's just... Starting with that title, Le Papier, Simone tells us that he is going back to the drawing board. And this is the perfect time, too. Jacquemus just named a new CEO, Bastien de Guzan, who used to be the head of Paco Rabanne. I usually don't cover fashion business news, but this is actually very relevant to this show here because Simone used to be the CEO of his own company. And fashion designers are almost never just fashion designers. They're CEOs and they're brand ambassadors, they're social media managers, they're the boss of dozens and dozens of people, etc., etc. But appointing someone else into that CEO role means that Simone has now freed up a bunch of his own time to focus on design. All of the pieces are now in place for us to start a new chapter, and this is the beginning. So let's look at some of the details of the show itself. So like I said, the most important theme here is the return to the drawing board. With the new freedom to focus purely on design, Simone is turning towards a new direction that, oddly enough, is a bit of a return to where he started. And that comes through looks that are kind of glorifying the process of designing clothes. There are elements in these clothes that, while they are very beautiful runway looks, there are elements here that are purposefully unfinished, kind of glorifying and showing the process of making clothes. There's even one look here that because of the type of poplin cotton that they used, it really truly appears to be two pattern pieces that have just been sewn together to do kind of an early prototype of the dress. And the paper tie-in here as well is also very cool because it's a reference back to the fact that all of our clothes ultimately come back to pattern pieces drafted and precisely measured on pattern paper. We're going to actually tie all of these together once I'm done kind of listing the things out because I want there to be a bit of a surprise, but we're just going to keep going down the list here. Look 4 is really cool because this is kind of a reverse bustle where usually these types of details are added nearer to the hem of a wedding dress in order to pull the long train of the dress up higher into the dress itself in order to allow the bride to dance at the reception. But here they're playfully adding that into the top of the dress rather than the bottom, which kind of creates the option for this playful asymmetry. We can also see the play of wedding bustles used here where the fabric ties that are used to create the structure of a bustle are just being decoratively added all over this top.
And you get the little play on words as well. Tie the knot. Haha.
The wedding themes, of course, continue in look 59, where it kind of has the look of throwing flower petals at the end of a wedding ceremony for the send-off. And of course, the wedding themes continue throughout the entire show as there's a very liberal and kind of abstract use of wedding veils throughout different outfits, used in some ways that look very much just like a styling choice where they're just kind of added on, and then in other places where they really feel like they're part of the outfit. I really like this one a lot. The wedding themes are very relevant to Jacquemus because if you have watched my huge breakdown of just a ton of Jacquemus shows, then you know that a huge part of the Jacquemus market is wedding dresses. Jacquemus was able to kind of disrupt the wedding dress market by saying look, you can spend $10,000 on this insane, gorgeous dress from David's Bridal or whatever, or you can come to us and you can get a dress that for a wedding dress is very, very affordable and it will look gorgeous on you. So the wedding dress thing has been a long-standing theme for Jacquemus, but I think here there's a lot of emphasis on this because our boy is getting married. Among the pantheon of good-looking dudes in fashion, our #1 eligible bachelor is finally settling down. And I think some of that excitement did kind of bubble up in a very literal way when two models came out at the beginning of the show and kind of held each other and spun on this platform that had been recessed down into the salt. It is kind of hard to communicate how effective this was in person. I do think it comes down a lot into the distance that was created, where you're very much watching two lovers come together off in the distance, and you feel like there's truly this sense of observation with them. It was a really sweet touch. I liked it a lot. We have a number of looks that have a strong tie to the CDG aesthetic, like this shirt and tie that have been kind of rolled up together. So while I don't have a comparison picture for you, I think we can all agree that this is a very cotton or wool take on what we've all come to know as the mainline Comme des Garçons look. In the show notes, they specify that certain pieces have been purposefully deconstructed in order to preserve the integrity of the line. Another way of saying that is that they've removed pieces from the garment's construction in order for the final look to be maximally clean. And as we remember from a few minutes ago, this use of deconstruction is also likely helping them ultimately to use that garment to point back to its wearer. We also know from the show notes that Simone was heavily inspired by the Giacometti brothers while he was designing this collection. Alberto Giacometti was a sculptor who was known for constantly fidgeting and playing and redoing his work up until the very last minute. And you can kind of see that in the end result. It really looks like he was in his studio just kind of going at it still until the gallery people showed up and were like, Alberto, we have to take this away from you now. Please stop. The Tate Museum's director and curator, Francis Morris, points us to a revealing story wherein this specific piece by Alberto Giacometti was inspired by his memory of seeing 4 women at a distance. And his memory wasn't so much focused on the women themselves, but how they were engulfed by the space that they were in. And there is certainly a great reinterpretation of that same idea in this show. So ultimately, here's the deal, and this is why the direction is really important. Simone started his career off at Jacquemus with a lot of mixed reception from critics. I was not a working critic at the time, but I have reviewed all of these shows in my mega video, and there is this kind of conflict with his interests in the design. There was this side that ended up winning out and making him a huge designer, and that is this very approachable, beautiful, innovative, very flattering, well-cut, just gorgeous clothes that ended up being the reason that Jacquemus is so important right now. But then there was this very clear experimental side, and he couldn't figure out a way to make those two things work together well. The experimental stuff was very cool, but a lot of critics at the time said he needs to make up his mind on what he actually wants to do as a designer. And specifically tying back to all the Comme des Garçons stuff that we saw in this show here, a lot of it looked like stuff that Rei Kawakubo would do. And so sometime in the early mid part of his career, Jacquemus switched and they just became like, we are the brand that makes the most beautiful clothes in the world. And a lot of that experimentation was there. There are innovative clothes from Jacquemus. If anyone has ever gone out and tried them on, there is a lot of interesting cut, cool pattern pieces. There's a lot of stuff there. But the like blatantly experimental stuff, that faded away. So here, now that he has this newfound time to focus very fully on the design, now that there's a new CEO in place, I think Jacquemus is returning to the drawing board and going back to his roots and trying to figure out how to make that balance happen again. And this show here is the best example of him balancing that new luxury that he's so well known for along with some solid experimentation. But here's the deal. I think that we are going to see Simone move in a much more experimental place in 5 years. Like if you compare the last show, Le Splash, with whatever show comes out in 5 years from now, I think there will be a radical difference between the two because designers now can't just change directions suddenly. Designers are expected to progress very slowly, to kind of build on their own world and introduce new regions of that world slowly as they go. And I think Simone will continue down this line of experimentation, and I'm really excited to see where he goes with it because he does have the design chops to be able to pull that off. And that's especially important because experimental fashion design does not usually mix with beautiful clothes. But Simone is keeping both of them, and I'm really excited to see where he goes with that. Join the Patreon. Look, here's the deal. I know you have heard me talk about it. I know that you have been thinking about it. Just do it. Join the Patreon. Do it right now. I cannot tell you how many people have messaged me and said like, oh my gosh, I've watched your channel for like 6 months and I've like known about the Patreon. And I was just like, oh, I'll do it later. And I finally joined and oh my gosh, this community is incredible. End quote. So many people have said that. Pause the video right now. Patreon.com/BlissFoster. It will literally take you 90 seconds to sign up. All right, that's it. To the like 7 people who are still watching the video all the way here at the end, I really appreciate your time. It means a lot to me. The fact that you come here and you give me your time every week, that I do not take that for granted. It means a lot to me. Thank you. Talk to y'all later. See ya. I'm the map, 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 I'm the map. I'm the map! I got it, right? Yeah.